How's it going, people? Jack here with another reaction. So I have been requested to check out some more from Maximilian Dood on some fighting game stuff, and I will oblige. But first, by searching his name, I got recommended this video on games graphics and on whether or not they are still a huge selling point for games. To that, I'm gonna say, to a certain degree, yes. If I were to bet on the audience, I would likely say that this has to do with the casual who are not like deeply invested into gaming, who are mainly just spending a few hours a week playing games, and or the non-gaming audience. As an example, I have a girlfriend who really does not like gaming. If the planets align correctly, she might play a Switch game or the Wii. Yes, I still own a Wii. It is a staple for every household. And with that, just like she has it with movies, she's kind of unable to suspend her disbelief when it comes to the art style of certain games. So if I were to show her like I guess you could call it a horror shooter of a certain form, like El Paso Elsewhere, the Max Payne looking game there, she's not gonna appreciate that at all. But if I were to show her something like Alan Wake 2, where the graphics are quite photorealistic, she'll vibe with it. She actually will get along, and that is something that is beautiful. Like, depending on the individual, the kind of entry to gaming that is required. So I do believe that for the non-gamer audience, that is definitely something that is a huge selling point. And of course, they're trying to riff off of, let's say, some cinematic universes, just like they do with Spider-Man and many other franchises. So that is at least one thing that I am willing to cede to. But generally speaking, although I am not that much of a purist of this ideology anymore, I would say that you have to focus first and foremost on the gameplay, because it's literally in the name. After that will come the plot or narrative, then we have the art style or art direction, and lastly, of course, the photorealism. So that is how I usually would look at it, but for the most part, this comes down to a game-to-game basis. That being said, we have a video here from Max. Let's hear what he has to say. Let's go! Oh, and by the way, I need to find myself an animator that can make me a great intro like this. It's so cool.
I think we're moving away from insanely high fidelity graphics, chat. I had a funny observation. Also, we were just talking during dinner. I think one of the contributing factors why Final Fantasy also has been decreasing in popularity over the years with FF16 and like Rebirth is also the fact that graphics don't exactly matter as much. And Final Fantasy as an overall series, as an overall existence, like the whole point of it, every new Final Fantasy game is going to blow your balls off visually. All the way up until Final Fantasy 15 has that been true. And even FF7 Remake to a certain degree, that shit was true. Where it's like, oh my god, the upgrade from the previous system to this one, holy shit, bro. Like, Final Fantasy is the game that you buy to, like, justifies my console existence. Like,
Yeah, I fully agree. And that was the same thing with the movies. That's what actually one of the biggest drawing point about them. Remember one of the first CG movies to really put CG animation on the map, which was Final Fantasy: The Spirit Within? There are things to be said about that movie, that's one thing. But it truly, at the time at least, was on that uncanny valley level of thing where you couldn't, at least in my eyes, couldn't exactly distinguish whether or not the things that you were looking at were real. It was, yeah, the uncanny valley effect there. But since that, it's just been the staple of Final Fantasy. The same thing they did with Crisis Core. The same thing happened with the one where Sephiroth as always gets revived. Advent Children. All of that. They kept on showcasing that, and it was amazing. However, we've come to the final point where that no longer can be the sole thing that can drive sales.
this because look how good it looks. Like, holy shit. Final Fantasy has always gotten a lot of sales based on that relationship where people just don't give a shit about Final Fantasy, but it'll pick people up and get them to play because it's just visually gorgeous. All I'm pitching is that graphics are obviously great, obviously beautiful, obviously makes you feel like, oh, my system is worth it. This console generation specifically, I don't feel like graphics are selling games anymore, because some of the games that all of a sudden just like exploded and are on top, like all of a sudden through virality and whatnot, are good looking games, but are they like the Uncharted's or something like that really pushed visuals and all this kind of shit? Not really. Like the virality of certain games sort of blows up. It is due to other reasons other than just straight visuals. So
I mean, they do push the visual envelope, but they accommodate for that with great gameplay as well.
Now you get clearly amazing looking games, which is Rebirth and 16. Gorgeous games like
Well, except for one thing with 16. Its RPG mechanic is
mid.
Because, god damn it, there's little RPG behind it. It is an action RPG, if we are to be completely honest. But yeah, a little bit of a nitpick.
Holy shit, dude. But they don't perform as well because people just aren't in it for the visuals anymore. And then you get something like Elden Ring. And I like this comparison. I'm gonna be real. Elden Ring is a gorgeous game, but I just looked at the gameplay trailer and that bitch ass game is not graphically impressive.
Looks like
bro.
shit.
They're like doing all these zoom-ins and tight shots of shit, and I'm like, yeah, this game is kind of rough visually. Most games now, if you like zoom in so much and it still looks good and it's like that's important about the game, no. Games like Elden Ring and even especially FF7 Rebirth to a certain degree, you zoom in on with a microscope and you get this close and you're like, wow, this game looks like shit. But then you go back from here and you're like, whoa, this game's gorgeous. Like even Zelda game, Breath of the Wild is that shit where it's like back from here, this game's gorgeous. Zoom in, this game looks like fucking trash, dude. I don't think we need to do this anymore, personally. For a lot of these,
like, don't get me wrong when I'm saying that. The art style of Elden Ring is amazing. Perhaps not the best visually speaking in comparison to most of the entries in the Souls franchise. I guess Souls multiverse, if we account for Demon Souls, most likely the remake was the best looking of all of them. But the art style is just so great that it doesn't really matter if something looks rough.
These games with these big worlds and all this crazy shit that's in them, I don't think we need to just peer into every corner, every facet. It's making games take way too long to come out. If there is a problem with this current era in the industry that I personally hate, why the hell are games taking 4 to 7 years to come out? That is where shit needs to change. We do not need that extra fidelity. We don't. Where you spend so much money on this shit, you're effectively 7, 8 days, 9 days, 12 days into your Lethal Company profit quota. And you're the Spider-Man 2 devs looking at that profit quota. And it's like, well, it cost us so much money to get here, and where are we at? We have to make that much fucking money on this shit, and we don't hit the quota. Now people are laid off. Even though you had like a banger of a run. Your game was incredible. It's like, this is not a functioning business anymore.
Yeah, I mean, especially what we've recently seen with Microsoft and other giants, right? Gearbox? No. Embracer Group, at least, laying off a bunch of people for no reason, simply because they want to give bonuses to their bosses. But I don't want to be that guy, but I'm gonna be that guy. It depends on the game, and it depends on also what the devs are trying to achieve with that game. For the vast majority, okay, I fully agree about this. But if we are to take into context, for example, when it comes to Elden Ring, for most people, it doesn't matter. The vast majority of players will never ever go close to look at what a character looks like, to get the clues that most of us who dive too deep into the lore do actually care about. Because for us, in order to get those things, we have to consult the like of Zully the Witch, who is a content creator who tends to like deconstruct the character models, who would tell you how those bloody fire golems are actually wearing the faces of giants, actually have dragons inside of them burning, which of course has a whole bunch of lore implications, but most people will never have that aspect of the lore conveyed to them lest they actually have like a camera tool that allows them to zoom in up close on a character. On the flip side though, take another game whose DLC was, until Shadow of the Erdtree came out, the most popular of all of them, The Witcher 3, with the Blood and Wine DLC. That game is extremely gorgeous. I'm playing it at 4K every single time that I get the chance, because it is just that good looking. Plays well, has a great story, mechanics are way better than the base game. Let's keep it at that. Now with The Witcher, oftentimes, not always, the graphical fidelity can actually be pretty important, as it does convey a lot of lore relevant stuff, like the scar on a character, like let's say Letho, one of the big ass Witcher there. It tells you that he has been on a battle, which will affect the choices that you have to take. Whether or not an item is missing somewhere when Geralt is doing his detective work, the microexpression on the person when you are questioning them is going to affect that. So it can be super important, and it is of course a deliberate choice made by CD Projekt Red to make most of their games, in the same way that they tackled that with Cyberpunk 2077, going up in that first person mode to look at characters up close when having to actually tackle a story was pretty damn good, and I don't think that they get enough credit for doing that. That being said, of course, that is for a specific kind of game.
This doesn't work out this way, dude. Through the looking glass at every single tiny bit and piece of everything. It isn't fun for us. It doesn't add any actual element to the game. I don't think it's necessary. I really don't. I think the majority of games do not need to do that shit.
Yeah.
They don't, and they shouldn't be doing that shit. To be real, you know what games are also like that? And they really kind of fall apart when you get that close to things. Almost all of Capcom games in RE Engine. You really look like,
True.
take a sniper scope with Leon and RE4 and zoom
Monster
in and look
Hunter.
at little spots. And you're like, this looks like shit. This actually kind of looks sort of bad, but
Okay, let's be honest, the RE4 remake did a great job.
from the natural perspective the game presents to you, it's fucking beautiful. It's beautiful. Seemingly, Capcom has gotten Dragon's Dogma 2 is, yeah, I'd imagine no exception, even though we didn't really look at that game too much. All I'm
yeah.
saying is that Capcom has seemingly found a pretty decent balance. You know what game's also like that? Monster Hunter World. Monster
Yeah, Dragon's Dogma 2 is exceptional in that account, because unlike Elden Ring, it does borrow a lot of elements from like the way that things are displayed for you when you are going through exploration. Like, for example, the verticality, the superposition of many things. When you are just having that Zelda Breath of the Wild moment where you are just standing somewhere, looking out to a map, and you know exactly where to go because things in the far distance are just showcased to you. And you are just going to thread a path. Plus, you don't have a mount in a game like in Elden Ring, so walking around is going to be a huge part of your gameplay. And you need to be entertained while doing that. So having things that are like close to like visually appealing, perhaps not exactly photorealistic, except for when they have photorealistic dong in the game. No, like seriously, you can smell this through the screen. But damn good looking is important, and they struck a fine balance doing that, especially when it came to things like loading time. There is barely any loading screen in the game. Unless you have to use a teleportation device or something of the sort, you are just walking from one point to another. An example, there is a quest with a Sphinx in it where you have to solve some riddles, and if you are pretty clever, as it is a two-parter, as the first part ends and the Sphinx is about to fly away, you can jump on her back and you just follow her, and she would literally go from one end of the map to the other. And the beautiful thing is that every single element that you come across are just on display. There are no weird loading screens, no weird pop-in, like for example when your ship is spawning in Assassin's Creed. Wonderful work, Ubisoft sometimes. And it is all laid bare in full crispy graphics, and I love when a game can do that. So it needs to find that fine balance, as he mentions here.
Hunter World is the same shit. That game is fucking butt ugly, and you stop and you just look at one spot. It's fucking butt ugly. But when you're running and doing things, it's gorgeous. Dude, this shit is awesome. Oh my God. This shit is awesome. That's what I'm saying. It is an old engine. It's an old ass game on like a decade plus old engine. But they were able to pump out the best selling Capcom game ever on technically old visuals. Now
Yeah.
I go back and I look at it, and it's like the Switch is the best example of that. You know,
Oh,
even
yeah, Monster Hunter Rise.
looks like an
Yeah.
upscaled fucking PSP game at times, and it sold a shit ton, and it's insanely rough looking. And I forgot about the visuals of Monster Hunter World when I was playing Rise, just because it was like, well, this is great. So anyway, related to Final Fantasy, All I'm saying is that Final Fantasy is a franchise that has sort of been based on the fact that every single new Final Fantasy is going to blow your balls off with its graphics and make you feel like you spent that $400 to $500 on your console. We're going to make it worth it, bro. From the PS1 to the PS2 to the fucking PS3, even the PS4. To be real, FF7 Remake and Final Fantasy 15, you're like, God damn, dude, yeah, holy shit, this feels like a big upgrade over PS3 shit. Hell yeah, this is pretty cool. Now, we have the smallest amount of return investment on newer consoles compared to the previous one, man. The amount of shit that has effectively changed from the previous generation to this generation to an actual relative perception is mad low. It is big, don't get me wrong. Load times and how that impacts the overall game experience is profound. SSDs, in my opinion, are where this shit shines. That shit is amazing. But to be real, all of the extra time and effort going into raw visual fidelity is not worth the time or the return of investment from the previous generation to this one. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues, and I would say, I guess, the limitations of the consoles. Because PCs have been busting through that for so long, and since we are in PC territory, one of the games that has done that, finding that perfect balance between extremely, in my opinion, photorealistic looking graphics, depending on how far you are willing to push it, gameplay wise and storytelling and everything, Baldur's Gate 3. Holy shit, that game is something. After finally seeding, after, I don't know, the 6th walkthrough to start modding the game, oh my god, what was I spending all my time doing not modding this game? It is so good looking, are you kidding me? I have done, just like in Dragon's Dogma, an insane amount of self-insert in the game, right? It looks good, that's one thing. But when you have a game that is quite literally built to have insane replayability because of the many gameplay features that are in there, how every single spell is interactive with even the cosmetics that you have on yourselves, and of course with how it affects the story, it's like, how can you not like something like that? And it looks so fucking good. Think about that. And again, loading time, same thing applies. How many, like, you decide when you are moving from one act to the other, and occasionally entering a cave or a special building, there are barely any loading time. And the beauty of it all is that it was shipped as a full package. Now, of course, like most games today, unfortunately, it had some issues at launch. Every single one had those, even Elden Ring. However, those things are continuously fixed and incredibly quickly, and it doesn't spoil the experience that you're having. And that's the thing I think that most people, at least most devs, should have in mind, despite the fact that, of course, most of them are forced to rush through the production, that if they could strike that perfect balance of gameplay as well as graphical fidelity and art style, people will not be complaining about it. Like, people are calling something like Hellblade's Chronicle a walking simulator, to which I'm like, the first one was pretty much the same and it had an audience for it. People will be calling a game that goes for extreme photorealism like Death Stranding extremely boring, but it has a massive audience. Dude, I was part of the Death Stranding subreddit when that game first came out. It's one of the best gaming community that I've ever experienced, and that is from a game where you have to walk 90% of the time. Until, of course, you unlock the vehicles. But my god, you can have those beautiful games, especially when it is things that involve processes, right? When things go slow, you actually get to enjoy the visuals.
It doesn't feel like anything has really changed that much. This generation is really disappointing just in general. The only way that it's not disappointing is in SSDs, is in fast-ass loading, and now we can change our games to play differently because of fast loading. I think that is 100% worth it. If we're talking about just like, oh, am I super enthused about my PS5 or Next box over the previous one? Fuck no, dude. Absolutely not. There is still only one game on my PS5 that I emphatically feel
Demon's
is
Souls.
a substantial, massive upgrade
Say it.
from the previous generation.
Say Demon's
Only
Souls.
one game, I still fire it up and go, holy sweet dumb hell. Right
Hell
there.
yeah.
It's this.
Hell
Launch
yeah,
it.
brother.
So to me, it's like, from what I've played personally, this shit is the only thing that felt like it was a big update, right? A substantial update from the previous generation. What I'm saying is that I don't think it's worth it. I think it's good that these games are running better, but is it worth it for these games to take like 5 to 6 years to exist? To put in every goddamn amount of effort, detail, developer time, concept art, all of this shit into the microscopic goddamn details of every single room? And I don't think it's worth it, man. I don't think it adds anything to the game either. For most developers to effectively throw out a game because it's so expensive to do this shit now, the game has to sell a shit ton or else the studio is sunk. So it's like, hey, we're gonna do this, and if it works, we're really gonna be in it, or if it doesn't work, we're fucking dead. That sort of a mentality leads an industry to take no risks. We can't take any risks anymore.
True.
We lost this, we lost that, we fucked up here, we fucked up there. That leads us to an industry that is not creative. Creativity is now not encouraged. You just have to be safe and do this one thing that we know is going to work. Game industry is made by creative people. The truly great games that are out there are made by creative people. It's the same thing for every goddamn thing. The stuff that we love so much is not made at a board meeting. It's made by people who have a fucking vision, and they get everybody in line with their vision and they execute within limited periods of time.
That's one of the reasons why so many people are always now relying on indie solely. I mean, most studios that are independent manage to do that pretty damn well because they can schedule things to their own liking and they actually get to execute the work that they had planned for themselves. For which I mentioned Larian Studios, or at least Baldur's Gate 3. It is technically an indie studio, but yeah.
Movie industries like that, the game industries like that, everything's like that with larger scale development. It's not a factory. You know, all I'm saying is that Nintendo, of all companies, seemingly is coming out on top now because they sort of get it. They knew they did not have to push graphical fidelity, and people still invested heavily in Nintendo. Even now, with their next generation, they're moving to something potentially PS4 Pro in terms of visuals.
Well, except for whenever they put out a game that is so butt ugly and that plays extremely bad. Pokemon Scarlet. What?
Clearly their workload's going to get much bigger, but dude, they're going to be in a spot where game development was at like 10 years ago, and it's going to look way better, don't get me wrong, but still, their choice to put out games isn't because they're taking forever to make. It's because that's just the way Nintendo fucking works. They do whatever the hell they want. They don't give a shit. They're just going to do what they want when they want, you know?
Now, that last statement is the truest thing that he ever said. Nintendo is the cartman of the video game industry. But guys, yeah, these were my thoughts on whether or not graphics do sell. I can still see that for some of the cinematically looking console games, especially for PlayStation. They still garner a massive audience. That's why the upcoming Spider-Man titles are said to have such a massive budget. It's insane. They don't need to do that, but what the hell are we going to tell those AAA studios? This point still stands. For a vast majority of games, graphical fidelity or ultra realism is not important. However, it is sometimes a good thing, and it's not mutually exclusive from good art style or gameplay. Yeah, these were my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comment section below, and if you liked the video, hit the like button. We're sure to have a wonderful day. See you guys in the next one. Bye.